time to turn across the table and speak to Solange Mougin, who is here to take us through the day's newspapers. Solange, you're starting off with a topic we've talked a little bit about, how the war in Ukraine has created a looming food crisis.
Yeah, and it is a crisis affecting raw materials across the globe, from the price of gas to metals to wheat. Le Figaro highlights on its front page how the pandemic and now the war has sent food costs up the roof. Now, with Russia and Turkey's foreign ministers discussing the possibility of corridors to export Ukrainian grain through the Black Sea, Libération explains how countries like Egypt, for example, are already facing shortages. And as the drawing by El Quds illustrates, such shortages due to bombs can be bombs in and of themselves, leading to riots, political unrest, and even upheaval, as this has happened in the past as well. Now, as Chapat notes in his cartoon for Le Temps, even in wealthier nations, the price hike in food is being felt, with this shopper asking to see who's responsible and the cashier saying, talk to Vladimir Putin.
And Solange, we're staying with Le Temps. They're also diving into how to keep this global food crisis from happening.
Yeah, the Swiss paper says that shortages due to the Black Sea blockade is quickly becoming a central element to negotiations. And as The Guardian tells us, the option of actually opening up shipping corridors was dealt a blow after officials in Kyiv said that it would take some 6 months to clear the coast of the landmines.
All right, Solange, we're going to move to the United States next, where Matthew McConaughey gave an impassioned speech about gun control. It's worth a watch, and opinions about it are coming in.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely worth a watch. And for the Washington Post, the American actor who is from Uvalde, well, he put Congress to shame in his ability to push for gun reform and in his ability to touch hearts and minds. And his speech shows, the paper says, how Congress has fallen short. Now, for the conservative press, though, Joe Biden is trying to pull celebrity wool over the eyes of voters. The National Review says that is not going to work, even if, quote, McConaughey has always seemed like a decent, not particularly partisan voice, according to that conservative media. Now, for NPR, it's a pair of green sneakers that really hit home in the speech. They allowed forensics to identify, you see them there, they allowed forensics to identify 10-year-old Métis because her body was so mutilated by the large exit wounds caused by AR-15s, the rifle used. The damage was so extensive that she was unrecognizable.
It's hard to think about. All right, Solange, here in France, police violence is becoming a top campaign issue. That's ahead of Sunday's legislative elections.
Yeah, after a series of events, the latest of which was a woman being shot and killed by police for not complying with a road stop, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the left-leaning French politician, said on Twitter that police kill and it is shameful. And in saying that, Le Monde explains that the head of the left coalition got reactions from the government and especially the far right, thereby bringing the issue fully into the campaign at a moment, Le Monde says, when polls show that Macron may not yet be able to get the simple majority of seats that he seeks.
Going to be interesting to see what happens on Sunday. Now, the press is saying that it's also a very big day in European politics.
Yeah, Libération explains on its front page, EU lawmakers are voting today over whether to ban gas and diesel fuel cars by 2035, a major element of Europe's Green Deal. The site says that car makers, but also nations like France, Spain, and Italy, well, in particular, they have been pushing hard against it, saying that it is not possible to simply get rid of combustion engines in favor of electric ones. No. Meanwhile, environmentalists are saying this change needs to happen now. As Politico notes, it's going to be a nail-biter with lobbyists out in force on both sides. The parliament is largely split on the issue, so it is going to be a tight vote.
And you have some environmental news for us next, Solange, and I should warn our viewers that it is not optimistic.
Yeah, the New York Times has a dire warning about the Great Salt Lake in Utah in the U.S. It says that if it keeps shrinking because of climate change, population growth, and agriculture, well, it could create what the paper calls an environmental nuclear bomb. Why? Well, there is arsenic at the bottom of the lake because of mining in the area. And if exposed because the water's gone, well, this arsenic could create poisonous dust that could threaten 75% of Utah's population.
Okay, Solange, you do have some positive news for us, though, and this time it is about cancer.
Yeah, and it's actually finally upbeat. The Independent tells us that for the first time, a cancer trial has cured all of its patients. The trial was quite small, around a dozen people from the New York Sloan Kettering trial, but it will now be enlarged to see if this immunotherapy drug works on a larger scale on other cancers as well.
And finally, from you, Solange, Paris's Disneyland has been making headlines for a couple of reasons.
Yeah, after a viral video of an employee interrupting a marriage proposal, snatching the ring and moving the couple off stage, well, the New York Times tells us that the Disney company has apologized to the couple, while the not-so-magical moment in the Magical Kingdom has created much outline online. Other couples, well, they're still pretty gaga about Disney. As Delish tells us, one couple, as an example, Delish says that a couple couldn't afford both catering and the appearance of Mickey and Minnie, so they chose a 30-minute visit by the world's most famous mice instead of serving food at their wedding.
Let this be a lesson to everyone having weddings. Always pick food.
Definitely. Food and alcohol over Mickey and Minnie.
Definitely. That's our opinion, at least. Solange
Yes.
Mougin, thank you very much for that look through today's papers. It's time for us to take